Greetings and good evening. Welcome to the gutter. Everybody ends up here eventually, so welcome.
Yeah, of course.
So, thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we're going to talk about EC Comics, their Picto-Fiction line, specifically Crime Illustrated from December of 1955, and your upcoming book, Judex. Would you like to give a little spiel of what we can expect for later in the show?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, I guess I should probably introduce myself. I know that most people who are watching your channel probably have at least heard of me. But in case you haven't, my name is Michael Oden. I'm the creator of Nine Realms Publishing, and I have produced such books as Elysian Fields and The Embrace is probably the biggest one. There is also a weeb book that we won't talk about because, that's that. But
No, let all your degeneracy hang out, man.
all right, so we had my fourth book was a book called SPQR's Bizarre
Okay,
Adventure.
that's enough. Let's go to the chat.
Fair enough.
But we have Raiden Radios joining us. He was first this evening. There are no awards for first place. In fact, it's usually frowned upon if you were waiting for this show. No one looks forward to it, especially
we are the gutter.
However,
everyone should be fashionably late.
Exactly. We also have Matthew Fowler. I love Matt because Matt is not afraid to speak his mind, so it's great to have him. Good to see you, my friend. My brother Snuggie of Team Bookmark. Great to see him here, as always. We have Jason Bascom from Unhinged.
We love you too, Jason.
He says, I love you. And I would just like to call out to you, sir, that I love you too.
Yeah, of course.
All right. We have Jason Sandberg. Jason Sandberg was the inaugural guest of the gutter last week, so it was great to see him. And congratulations, sir. You have surpassed 5K on Jupiter. So well done.
What a great accomplishment. Indeed. Congratulations, man.
Yep. We also have the man, the myth, the legend, possibly the Cassandra of our times in Aerith, who continues to tell everyone what they should be doing and no one listens, much to my entertainment. We also have Dean James. Dr. Dean Hatton, if you will.
Caught Bob caning red-handed. You know what, Dean?
And then, of course, no chat is ever complete without the one, the only Mo Biggs. Good to see you, Mo. There's going to be some weebery. You might want to put your earphones on.
We're not going to have much weebery. We've already discussed the weebery. Judex is farthest thing from weebery that we can possibly be. And, we're going to be launching that. I believe the idea is to launch July 14th for Bastille Day because we've got this outstanding pulp noir
Would you like to explain what Bastille Day is for the public school graduates in the chat?
Oh, I apologize. That's right. We are in the gutter. So Bastille Day is effectively French July 4th. It is their day of independence because it is the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille.
Gotcha. So, well, that was enough French history. So yes, tonight, though,
I forget. We're not on Vive l'Empereur.
Yeah. Would you like to run my show?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. So in the mixed media cornucopia of Americana, right, there are hundreds of unique cadavers of creativity that have gone to the market and died, not to mention massive wrong turns. Failed novellas, one-shot radio plays to magazines so incredibly niche that their circulation was measured, actual issues sold in the tens. Hell, there is even a Bob Kane fan club, which we're going to talk about later tonight, that has a membership of one. And somewhere in the middle of all of these haphazard failures of market penetration resides the topic of our discussion tonight. EC Comics 1955 to 1956 Picto-Fiction line. So you had a chance. I sent over some material to you. If you could, just give a general takeaway on what your thoughts of it were.
So from a writing standpoint, it was really cool to be able to read this kind of in between like the old dime book Penny Dreadful to the like to the comic. It's so these books are effectively paneled out illustrations. We haven't
Well,
got.
I was saying, what was your impression of them? You don't have to describe them. I've got
Oh, I
pictures.
apologize.
I can
I mean,
actually hold the issue
they're
up.
fun. They're fun reads. It was definitely a good time to go through. I think I really liked the first one the best with the guy that gets brought in to this one. Yeah. I'm blanking on the name. He's brought in to investigate this missing persons who was his ex-lover, and she's been married to this rich mogul, and he doesn't want to go to the cops to draw attention to himself, so he hires this guy who's a PI to investigate her being missing. And the guy immediately notices, well, she's probably not missing, she's probably been murdered. And he strongly suspects the person that's brought him in to do the case to be the person that killed her.
Okay,
and so
well, I
it's
appreciate the review and the impressions when I was talking about the entire magazine, and you go into the first story. We'll work on learning or listening comprehension later.
fair enough.
So, EC Comics, Picto-Fiction, what were they? EC Comics at the time in the early 50s, we have to separate everything from really before mid 1955. Conveniently, it's in the middle of the decade, obviously, but something happens in the middle of 1955 that's drastic for comics, often massively overblown in its both implication and reach, and the reasoning behind it, because everybody would rather talk about the, 2-sentence nuanced reason they read about once on a forum rather than looking anything up and finding out how it actually happened. And of course, what we are talking about is the response to Dr. Wortham's hissy fit in front of Congress, which was the Comics Code.
Yeah.
Prior to the Comics Code being formed, EC Comics was renowned for pretty much two things: a very sophisticated tone in all of their books, which kind of was cutting edge for that time. And the other one was a no holds barred approach to showing just about everything: violence, ghastly images. I mean, Graham Ingalls got his start, really gained his fame working for EC, and he held the precursor to his name, Ghastly Graham Ingalls, for a very good reason. And it was because of the work that he did for EC books. Specifically, a lot of their early books in the 50s were the dying of the pulps in the late 40s kind of drove what they were doing at EC. So as like Astounding Stories in particular was kind of the one that thrust them forward. As that book died, they really latched on to its market share. And that's where you get Two-Fisted Tales, which of course is the classic book that was just another guy. Gosh, I can't remember who did it, but somebody else just kind of used a play on that. Two-Fisted Manly Tales is a play on the classic EC book. Frontline Combat. Both of those books ran 50-51 for quite a few issues. What you saw in all of them was a high level of humanity, really focused on inner conflict. Again, they did not shy away from violence. That cannot be referenced enough. So that continues. Wortham has his hissy fit, and the Comics Code is established. The Comics Code, of course, was a private entity. It was not governmental oversight. It was the market dictating and controlling itself. We can talk another time about the merits of all of that. But the response was EC had to change. And so what EC changed was they changed all of their books to more of an adult theme. And this is where like the famous Impact #1 comes out with Bernie Krigstein. This is where you get they're kind of just shotgunning at this point. And they're throwing stuff at the wall. One of the things they did do is they had a book that was called Mad Comic that was a big hit with adolescents. They watered down it a little bit and they made it into a magazine, and it exploded in sales. So they went, well, hell, if it worked once, let's try it again. And so they did it again, and they did it with 4 issues. And those 4 issues were part of their Picto-Fiction line. And it was Confessions Illustrated, Terror Illustrated, Shock Illustrated, and the issue you have before you here, Crime Illustrated. And everything about these was different. It was not sequential art, as Ogden mentioned earlier. It was something completely different that nobody had really ever seen before. So, going along with what he previously talked about, what you have here in issue 1, there are 5 stories. And the art on these is, as we're getting to that, is going to be something special. Did you have anything to share on the art?
I mean, it's incredibly detailed. It's atmospheric. The use of hatch lines and creation of contrast is absolutely fantastic. It's a very high level of detail. When you look at comic book art sequentials, there's a lot of simplification for the sake of getting things done on deadline and everything. Like you make things detailed, but because you're trying to get specific dynamic angles in and what have you, certain elements of any given piece could lose its complexity, and you don't really have that here, because generally things are done at a close-up shot or like an establishing shot with a pretty basic angle. So the artwork's very detailed and very high contrast, but we aren't getting those same necessarily dynamic angles in each thing, and the pages aren't laid out in a way where one panel's larger than everything. Like, everything's got the same panel size to fit certain amounts on the page, so that way you can also blend in text, which isn't put down as like comic book lettering. It's sections of text with prose, and it's really great.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And because I felt that it just wasn't enough to have your long-winded answers in response to all of my very short and direct to the point questions, I figured, you know what, we need to have somebody else here that can also drone on and on. And so that's why I also extended an invite to Nefarious. So Nefarious, you're welcome. Welcome for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you can keep Michael under control. I made sure to add you right when you said be right back. So you're welcome for that as well. So here, right when you open this up, you look that there are the 5 stories that are previously mentioned. You've got, they were written by L. Feldstein, Jack Olick, Richard Smith, who is actually Al Feldstein's pseudonym, John Larner, and Alfred E. Newman. And yes, that is a Mad reference because, again, this is the publisher of Mad. And that is also Al Feldstein. Across all 4 issues, actually, if you look down a little bit too, you'll see that Al Feldstein was the editor. He wrote on average 2 to 3 stories for every magazine that came out in the Picto-Fiction line, plus was the editor. Somehow he managed to get them out on time. It's amazing based off of current standards and what we've become used to here. But if you look down, here's the issue. And I really want to talk about the art on these. The art is, it's simply amazing. Again, this is 1955. These are pen and ink drawings, and they're just simply astounding. It's the little things that you really appreciate the longer you look at these. And I'm going to zoom in. The glassware that's on the table, the backgrounds, it's incredibly simple. You've got a nice little, just the Art Deco stylings. Everything's very simple, and it just kind of fades as you look back in the back curtain there. It just kind of fades away. But the detail is there, and that carries across every page. So even though it's not quote unquote sequential art, you still get a really, really nice quality to it. So yeah, as you were saying, Michael, it's basically it's prose and illustrated fiction. It's Picto-Fiction. That's what this is, and it really is. It's I think you described it as it's the closest you can ever get to a direct bridge between pulp and comics. and it is a complete home run in that regard. However, the market disagreed, and this sold worse than dog shit. So, given that of the two of you, I hold Neff in slightly a higher regard for his understanding of marketability and productivity, I would like
That's
to.
fair.
Yeah, that's the caveat. Okay.
What's your takeaway on these? You got a chance to look at them, hopefully. Why do you
So,
think this didn't resonate with the market?
so I looked at the crime ones. It's funny because each one was done slightly differently. With like one of them had text overlay over the images, and this one had like the foregrid, and another one had like one full image and then a page of text. I think that this was a very transitional, I guess, media for the time, right? Like, this is the 50s, right? So we have stories that are written that people are reading, and then we have comics, which have an entirely different audience. I think people probably had trouble figuring out how to read these. Maybe there wasn't enough content in the story to like keep them engrossed. I don't know how people were reading stuff on the train, but or traveling, which is one of the reasons that newspapers and periodicals were as widely consumed as they were. It was portable media, right? I don't know if this was sold to that degree or consumed to that degree. But I could understand like the desire for this type of thing. I don't know. I think it reminds me a little bit more like what you would see in a zine these days. I remember seeing in like the 90s stuff very much like this, with just illustrations that had much larger blocks of text overlay. But as far as marketability, they probably just didn't find an audience that wanted specifically what they were offering. That was probably caught between two audiences.
Okay. Now, you did speak a little bit about, it didn't sell well, and I've mentioned that as well. And it didn't sell well is kind of an understatement. Grimes actually ended this after I think only one of them made it to 3 issues. Most all of them made it to 2 issues. So it does extend into 1956. But by March of 56, they're all done. All 4 books are done. And the second issue of several of these was actually shipped back by the distributor. They didn't even distribute them.
Oh,
They
wow.
were still wrapped. They were still wrapped from the printer. That's how. Now, this is an interesting part for collectors because these are extremely collectible. And this is one of the rare times when, because something sold so poorly, you can actually get really, really nice copies of these. Because a lot of them never hit the newsstand. They've never been circulated. And every once in a while, you'll see one crop up. They'll go for like $600 to $800. This week on eBay, Terror Illustrated with heavy water damage went for over 40. And it was barely like the first 15 pages are barely legible. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of the collectability of these. That took until the late 70s for any kind of a market to emerge. It's primarily, it started with Feldstein and EC fans, and then it exploded in the 90s when the EC reprints started with Vault of Horror and Tales from the Crypt. And obviously the HBO series Tales from the Crypt had a lot to do with rejuvenating the classic 50s and 60s horror comics. So when you looked through these, did anything resonate with either one of you? Both with how the story was constructed, did you feel anything about the writing? Did you see anything there? Because the writing's unique in a way.
Oh, well, in terms of the writing, it really does feel like, that classic pulpy noir storytelling. And, as Neff mentioned, like, this definitely feels like a transitional piece where they're definitely trying to cash in on the popularity and rise of comics, but this is a more adult focused book. I think that's ultimately one of those things that comes into even why it didn't do as well as it did. You even see this from time to time, occasionally with like animated features where the who the audience is intended gets mixed up. Like Hunchback of Notre Dame was too dark for kids to really enjoy, and it had too much goofy shit in it for adults to take seriously because it undercut those dramatic moments. It's not to this extent here because, you know, the illustrations are still very complex and professional and everything, and the writing is equally as dense. But like at this point in time, adults saw comics as, you know, trash literature. It's for kids. You grow out
Actually, I will correct you there. This is the 50s. We haven't quite moved into the 60s yet.
Okay.
Pre-code, it was not uncommon for adults to be seen reading them.
Well, I stand corrected.
Yeah. So it's pre-code. Post-code is when you start seeing adults think of them more as kids' books. But you'd see adults riding trains. There's multiple pictures of either the L in Chicago or the subway in New York of people reading Vault of Horror while they're waiting for a train. Simply because they were cheaper than a paper. And it was a quick read. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the early EC books are so valuable, is because you'd read them and toss them. No different than the pulps that preceded them.
If you look at the storytelling here, it's incredibly tactile. I mean, just the 2 paragraphs here, they're really immersive. I'd say like this is some of the better writing that I've seen in comics. I don't read a lot of 50s comics, so I really don't get the cadence, the pacing of the paragraphs, the way that the sentences flow together. Just this little bit, and like I said, I only really looked at the pulp, so this I didn't really look at the horror, so I didn't really get a feel for the language used in there. But in this, it's very gritty. There is a very significant emphasis on the sensory experience, both metaphorical and physical.
There we go. Yes, so that's what I was hoping you guys picked up on is. Because of the nature of Picto-Fiction, and all of them are this way, I think it's most evident in the Crime Illustrated series. What you get is the writer focuses a little bit more his attention. Because you have the image, you don't need to tell what's going on. So it's a sensory description. They're letting you know what the air smelled like, or what the temperature was, or what the texture of the curtains were. So it's almost like you're reading Dashiell Hammett every other sentence, basically. Yeah. And it's kind of a strange cadence reading it at times for how Feldstein in particular has structured everything. But yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that is one of the things that is, and it reads different. If you compare this to prose at the time, I'm not going to say it's not an easy read, but it's different. And usually,
this is actually a thrilling. I would say it's a thrilling read. It really does get you immersed in the content, and being able to also examine the picture and look for the details. Like the fence, the hogs, the muck. All of that, I think I would probably really enjoy reading these for what they are today. It's both a blessing and a shame that they didn't do so well, right?
No, for sure. And they do, in a lot of ways, they do resonate a lot more now than they did then. I don't know how much of that it speaks to the dearth of quality of our current entertainment and writing. You'd assume things would go up in quality, but alas, we know that not to be the case, because the 70s exist. So, well, yeah, this is Fool's Gold, and this is drawn by Ghastly Graham Ingalls, who went on to obvious massive fame with everything that he's done for EC. And yeah, they're awesome, great stories. I could encourage you all to look these up. I'll go through the 4 titles again. If you are a fan of what we've kind of been showing you, just go to Internet Archive and check them out. Most all of them are there. And it's that those 4 titles, again, were Confessions Illustrated, Terror Illustrated, Shock Illustrated, and Crime Illustrated, the 4 Picto-Fiction books from EC Comics from 1955 to 1956. And why I thought this would be a fun one for you guys was you guys have put together a book, Judex. And it's very heavily pulp inspired based off my conversations with Mike. And I kind of got the impression that, it's pulp, but it's a comic. And it's definitively a comic. You guys didn't try to do anything unique or special. You just tried to make the best book you possibly could with the theme that you wanted. Is that accurate, guys?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that even down to getting Fabrizio, the big thing that we were looking for with that was I wanted to approach Judex and make it feel like a black and white film. And Fabrizio's line work is so gorgeous in just his black and white that it does just that. It captures the atmosphere of like a 1930s, 1940s black and white Zapatone film. It's beautiful. And so we really wanted to like lay down that atmosphere of pulp noir, and we had this character that, you know, has his own relationship and history with pulp characters like the Shadow. You know, one of the things that Neff even pointed out to me, and I hadn't even realized when I was doing my initial research, is during World War II, Shadow stories were not allowed in publication in France, so they snuck them in by publishing them as Judex stories. And so like it was just this perfect thing to kind of rework this public domain character that has this big relationship with probably one of the most important pulp characters of all time. And make this story about, you know, liberation and what have you during this occupied time in French history, and have this guy be this kind of embodiment of French culture, very much similar to Aldous. I believe in one of our discussions that we've had offline, you discussed how Shadow is pure Americana, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that way, Judex is pure French culture. Like,
well, I'll let Neff answer before I follow up on something you said there. Neff, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, when Oden came to me with Judex, he came to me with a story that he had written about Judex and a police officer. I didn't know anything about Judex. I didn't know it was a public domain character. I didn't know really much of anything. So I had to go and I had to do the research into the character on my own. And then I started talking to Oden about it more, and you know, the understanding of Judex grew. And what Oden wanted to do, from what I understood, was make a more contemporary comic using more of the stylistic applications that we have now, like more of the bande dessinée influence, less of the manga stuff, but more American comics than something like what we were just looking at, or something older. We did try and focus a lot on the clarity level storytelling, you know, so it's the frames are very well established on the page. The flow was of incredible importance, and like Oden said, it's a story of liberation that, you know, he wanted to tell. The form that it's taking, like, you know, like you said, we're doing an American comic, nothing super special, but we're trying to make it the best, classiest comic that we can. And that's what a lot of my focus has been on. A lot of my focus in the art direction.
So if I could read between the lines, between what the two of you said, Neff tried to make it separate, unique. You're trying to structure out the story, and what I hear from Ogden is really he's going along the same lines as his stated hero Bob Kane by directly ripping off a black and white movie. Because Judex was a 1916 12-part serial that was a huge hit in France.
Yes.
So, how much of that are you Bob Caning?
Not much, really. Like I've watched some of the serials because I found a few of them up on YouTube and everything, since they are public domain. There are people that have posted them. But like the big thing for me was, you know, Judex in the original serials, if I recall correctly, he's
going after a banker, right?
Yeah, he's going after a banker
a corrupt.
We don't do any of that.
Yeah, we don't do any of that.
Yeah.
We
started in Nazi occupied France. So
yeah, like it
kind of just when Oden came to me with the story, it had nothing to do with anything Judex had previously done.
Okay.
It was almost like we were entering Judex's world when Judex got put on hiatus and they started telling shadow stories under Judex's, Judex stories under the Shadows moniker.
No,
right?
and that's awesome to hear. That's I think this is a character that's ripe for because it's kind of it's a continental shadow in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to hear that you didn't Bob Kane, despite your massive appreciation for the man. You didn't follow in his footsteps with what he did with Partners in Peril. So, taking that original Shadow story and directly copying it into the first appearance of Batman. So, when you were talking about Fabrizio and you're bringing him in for art, was there a specific tone that you were really looking for here? Because
Oden found Fabrizio first and
Yes.
started working with him when we had kind of started making the script structured, I guess. So when I got to it, I think the Globe was the first page that I saw from Fabrizio. Because I came in a little bit once art had started rolling. And Oden really had the vision for what this was supposed to look like, and he found the artist, and the artist really does bring the sense of what Judex is to the page. We could show you some pages. Let me just bring some up, and you can see them for yourself.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I mean, to that effect, I don't know if there was like a specific tone I was looking for going to. I was searching for artists that really had a good black and white style, and Fabrizio's came up. The first thing I saw from him, he had done this profile piece of Morpheus from Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which was really pretty, and that brought me to his ArtStation page, and then he had this piece of like a 1940 Oldsmobile, like driving down a street, and there's this these intense close-up shots of this woman in one panel, and this guy smoking a cigarette in the panel below him, and it was just super dynamic, and it was very atmospheric, and it felt like an old 1930s film. And I was like, this is the guy for this book. And Fabrizio's done just absolutely stellar work. Really excited for people to get to see this stuff. It's been really cool watching him work. He's been such a great professional. Whenever Neff finds something wrong, Fabrizio never really pushes back. Sometimes he'll be like, this is why I did something. But if Neff ultimately says, I understand that, but this has got to go, and we've got to do it this way, Fabrizio is always quick to just go, okay, sounds good, and he gets it done.
Gotcha.
Neff, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted now.
Neff, you're muted.
So if we go back real quick, look, just kind of highlight these pages, and we're talking about the depth. You've got great depth. The pencil and ink work is just fantastic. Heavy focus on faces and fine detail is present. Are you taking that approach, or are you? I guess we can pull up the artwork and see for ourselves here.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's the first page. I'm gonna try and do a little bit of see if we can. No.
Why don't we jump to the second one real quick so we don't get flagged for any reason?
So you don't get struck. Hold on. I really don't like it when my here. There we go.
So
is that getting bigger now? Is that bigger on the screen? Okay, so I'm now just looking at the drive. I can't see you. So my ability to interact with you guys is going to be a lot more limited. But as you can see, like the grays, the blacks, the way that he's doing the contrast here, it really feels very old school and fashioned. But then you see art like this, and this is a much more contemporary, modern take on these faces, right? Like you can tell the art style here is much more modern.
For sure. And why in my personal opinion, I mean, obviously the N-word guys that from Germany, they tend to be overused as villains, especially if you're doing something like this with a pulp influence. I mean, the Shadow went from fighting anarchists of both sides, fascists and communists, throughout the 30s and 40s in the pulps, to pretty much all he fights now are fascists. We have completely forgotten about communists. And why pick occupied France instead of post de Gaulle France, or during de Gaulle's rise and the influence of communism there? Why
Well,
focus on this period?
well, so
That's an Odin question. Yeah, definitely.
the big thing that I really wanted to do with this, and that's absolutely a direction that we can go with the character eventually, depending on how far we end up going. But I really there's this theme that I have in throughout the issue that Paris is kind of, because of this occupation, they have capitulated, right? There's this book takes place within a year of the occupation, and so he is noticed that this despair, this hopelessness in the city, and he's like, Paris deserve if Paris is to end, it deserves a louder end than this, than this gasp, this this very weak end. It deserves to explode, right? And so it was just this idea of having him be this character who's calling to arms these people to not just take this, right? And so that was the whole idea, was, he is trying to reignite the will of his people.
He realizes they're French, though, right?
So I'll say is, when Odin came to me, I don't know if you've noticed, but Mike's been dealing with a lot of N-word stuff lately, thematically, with the stuff that he's been doing. So I think part of this was about the stripping of identity from people, right? By an outside force that invaded and occupied a place. And for him, that setting spoke very loud to the emotional resonance that he had with the story. So while we could have done a different political group, or addressed a political violence in a different way, it wasn't so much that particular element, the fascism, the armbands, that's not really what Odin was jazzed about. Odin was jazzed about a cultural hero trying to remind his people, in a very V for Vendetta sort of way, that they had lost something. It had been taken from them by these people, and they needed to go and get it back rather than giving in. And that's what resonated with me. Odin talks about the Shadow a lot. I see V for Vendetta here. When I look at it, I see a cultural battle for the soul of a nation within people who have been complacent and allowed themselves to capitulate to occupation forces who tell them what to do. And there's a real resonance between our culture currently in our modern situation and this more historical setting. So allegorically, I think it works.
Okay, how do you think? Because those are two diametrically opposed influences there. The Shadow and V have very different motivations. They're totally different characters, almost opposite sides of the coin in many ways.
But it's funny that you should mention that, because Judex has got a coin. It's kind of his thing. It's got two sides to the.
So we've got Two-Face, Judex. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not doing any Bob Caning here? Are you?
I'm not doing any Bob
There's
Caning.
the coin. There's the coin.
So you've got
it to Javert, right? Yeah, there.
Okay.
We actually got the mock-up for the coin today. Back
That's
from the
great.
first pass of it came back from the manufacturer. So
very nice. So you're putting this campaign together. You're launching on Bastille Day. You're just collecting signups right now. if you where do you hope to take this? Is this a one-off? Is this something that you're going to be doing more of?
We will be doing more. I have an entire first storyline that I have been workshopping with Neff. Here we have a very exciting antagonist for Judex that's going to be coming in, and we're looking at we're in talks with certain people to do different crossovers with things. I don't want to speak too much on that because there are things that are in the works, and I don't want to put that out unless Neff gives me the green light.
I can talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
We love the idea of collaborating with people. So
yeah,
we know that there are other pulp characters kind of with the same feel or from the same time period, public domain characters that people have been working with. And we approached some of those teams and suggested, hey, why don't we do like a little crossover story? Maybe it leads to something bigger. And they were all very excited. So we might have a couple of different, Judex plus so-and-so. The one that I'm currently working on is with Miss Fury. And we've got another writer coming back to us with something that they're going to be, writing. And then we're going to be doing the art direction for that, and that'll be on the Indiegogo campaign. But what I really like is the way that Oden's kind of unspooling this story about France. The second issue that he's got lined up is told in a very enjoyable way. I don't want to say it's unique because it's not really unique. Like a narrative poem kind of narrating the action across the first several pages as it reaches a climactic moment. That's been done before, but I still really love it. I really it gets my juices going when I think about it. And it's Oden's prose. So taking that and taking his dialogue, condensing it, distilling it, it gets really strong. I'm really pleased with these scripts. I think that there's some of the best work that he's done.
Very nice. So you've got a story set in France with a character that's loosely based on half Shadow, half V, in a story that's...
You make it sound like it's some sort of weird amalgamation of strange blends. It's fine.
No, I think it's an interesting take from what you've got a lot going into the pot on this one, so to speak. The art looks really nice. The story sounds engaging. I'm kind of looking at the parallels here. One of the things that Oden said early on when he was talking about Picto-Fiction was it was a bridge between two worlds, the pulp and the comic. Is this a bridge in any way between the two of you as far as stylistic or direction that we could take any indication towards?
You mean a bridge between me and Oden?
Just throwing it out there.
Well, Oden and I have got other projects that we're working on together. So
yeah,
is this a like a entry level piece to see how it goes, or are you rolling forward with other things? Can we anticipate more joint ventures like this?
We've got at least, so for this year we have 2, and then we already have another 2 separate IPs lined up, I believe, as well.
We've got Judex and the Field for this year. Kevin Keen's on the Field. Oden's doing a full length issue for Mavericks called Mavericks MSS, which is Mobile Support Service. Focuses on combat engineers repairing Mavericks on the field of battle, which is really cool. And then Oden's putting together Romans versus Zombies.
That's going to be so much fun.
Come on. Romans versus Zombies. It's a winner right there. I love his ideas. His ideas are great. And then he's got another character, which is really incredible. It's fascinating. It's going to be hard to pull off because there's a definite sci-fi underpinning to the character. But it's called Janus, and he's based on the two-faced god Janus. This dude's got just some incredible ideas, and I'm really happy to partner with him to bring him to life.
Yeah, it's been a fun collaborative effort. Neff has become a sounding board for me. There's not even a question of do we work well together. Like whenever we're editing scripts, there'll be times where like he'll be writing something in, and I was just about to type that. Like no,
Literally, I'll be
I
writing
think
something.
that
He'll be
happened at
finishing the
least 5 or
sentence.
6 times going through Judex.
It's crazy.
Like working with Neff has been absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot that I've been able to learn from him as well, things that I didn't have before in terms of art direction, everything like that. There's osmosis there, and it's made me a better writer, and it's made me a better producer of an editor of my own stuff, my own material.
Very good. So closing out, as we hit the bottom part of the show, what are your takeaways? Do you see, after reading some of the Picto-Fiction from EC, do you find yourself reflecting on any of your work? Do you see any parallels? Do you see anything that you could change? Were there any takeaways that you think were like something that you could add?
I think that the biggest thing that the Picto-Fictions showcase is that you don't have to be afraid of using like descriptive language and everything like that. Like there is generally a rule of making sure that you don't have more than X amount of words in a balloon or on a page or everything like that. I think that one of the things that the Picto-Fiction show is that doesn't necessarily mean that while you have those things, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make them simplistic. These books are incredibly engaging. As Neff said, they bring you into the story. They're very atmospheric in both their language and art. And so that's something that I definitely like to try and work in. And I think that I do a bit in Judex. I think that the language, especially Judex's dialogue himself, the other day I posted up a tweet with one of his actual quotes from the book, which I believe is, I am here to preside over your sins and judge the verdict. That kind of dialogue isn't something that you would see necessarily in a lot of contemporary books, but it is something that you would see in a Picto-Fiction. It's got that kind of more adult feel to it, in that it's not brought down to any specific level. It's just it's allowed to be mature. It's allowed to be what it is.
Very
I would
good.
say definitely mining the atmospheric elements of the Picto-Fiction. I wouldn't mind, I guess, taking some of the ways that the language is used to build the atmosphere, the setting, the tension within the story, and seeing if I could transpose some of that into maybe longer portions of text that might guide the visual narrative to a conclusion. Honestly, I think that we might be able to do something like that with the beginning of the second issue that Oden's already started to compose. But as it stands, we didn't really think about doing a Picto-Fiction style story, although that's a very interesting idea that I'd be open to exploring, man. This is why talking to people in these communities are so freaking cool, because I really didn't know anything about Picto-Fiction until you sent me the links and I got a chance to look at them. I'm not that educated in comics, certainly not the way you are. So finding this stuff and learning about it it's invigorating, because there's new tools, there's new techniques, and there's new things to borrow from and to build on top of.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the great things. I mean, we've talked about Savage Sword of Conan and action sequences, and Spider-Man and dynamic posing, and how do you break down panel structure? And I think what the standout for me, and why I would recommend Picto-Fiction, especially to writers, is for the very reasons you guys cited. Because of the static nature of the panel, you have to be able to tell concisely what's happening, and that's hard for a lot of writers, because you get into that the overextension of verbiage that's unneeded, and then it's what is the panel showing you that you don't need to tell, and then the structure of that story therein. There's a lot of people that could learn how to break out a splash page or a double splash, and how to actually layer dialogue on top of it that adds to it. And of course, as always, there's the distinct lack of narration that's done these days. That is, it's a lost art, and there's certainly something to be picked up there. So,
I've got a 2-page spread for you in this book, Aldous.
okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's like
Panel
eh,
composition that goes beautifully
want
across the page with inset narrative text boxes that do a sort of narration. It's like a voiceover narration that guide. It's different than what you're seeing in the panel, but it guides the journey through each of these moments. I got something for you. I think you're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah, the opening 5 pages of this book are a narration by Judex, pretty much. It's pretty great. Like I think you're gonna have a good time with this book, man.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, unless you have anything else, I think that'll be it for today. We try to keep the things in the gutter here short because while everybody ends up here, no one wants to spend a whole lot of time. So thank you both for joining me. I will close this out by saying, Yeats said the best lack all conviction while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And gentlemen, you both have a little bit of each. So have a great
I'll settle
night
with
all.
being the best of the worst. Yeah.
Right. Have a great night all. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening in The Gutter.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.